Welcome to another conversation with Conversio. I'm your host, Mr. Lee Matthew Jackson, and today we have on the show the one and only. It's Rob Seger from Monarx. Rob, mate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm tip-top and champion, mate.
Oh,
Really
nice.
happy to be hanging out with you as well, especially after our first glitch where we realized we're in two completely different time zones.
It's an important thing to know.
Exactly right. Well, Rob, for the folks who don't know you, could you just give us a little bit of a bio of Rob and of your position within Monarx, what you all do, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a longtime hacker. I started way too young. I worked, luckily, before things were illegal. I just want to put it out there. So all the things I did, totally legal. But yeah, I was reverse engineering things before college.
Yeah.
Got into college and I was so excited about computer science, and I discovered that they wanted me to reinvent the wheel, and I was going to drop out. I discovered philosophy, and I fell in love with hacking in the intellectual sense. And so I got to work against the most intelligent minds in human history, and they crushed me, and it was wonderful. But that gave me a real taste for the combative side of hacking. I had been doing reverse engineering, was basically just me against bits and bytes.
Yeah.
I ended up in the National Security Agency, kind of learning, flexing those wings, really getting under the hood. I did some awesome, amazing, really cool stuff in there that I'll never be able to tell you. But I also had the most boring experiences of my life where it was just like bureaucracy, beating my head against the wall. And so I ultimately had to swing out of government in general. And I ended up in startups because kind of exactly the opposite in terms of bureaucracy and all that. We're go all the time.
I'm just playing a million action movies in my head right now, by the way. And you
exactly.
being that like hacker on the other end, like, I'm in.
It's good stuff. Hi. Yeah, but after I got into startups, I started thinking about security a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Previously, I'd been essentially the attacker, and I thought that I was the greatest thing in the entire world because there was always something I could figure out. I could get in there, I could undermine this, I could do that. It was great. And then in startups, it turns out there's not a ton of money in that. It's much more on the defensive side. And I realized that I hadn't been a great attacker so much as the attacker has ridiculous advantage. The defender has to cover literally everything possible opportunity. The attacker just needs to find the one that was weakest. And so I was humbled and have been struggling on that side ever since, because it's exciting to not only be able to help people, but also to be constantly working uphill. It's just intellectually where I live comfortably.
It also feels like the right side, mate.
Yes.
Feels like the good side.
It is more helpful for society. I could see that argument.
Yeah. Although I know there is also the ethical hacking side of things as well, isn't there? Where people are attacking, but only to highlight directly the issues that they find, which can then be fixed. So I know there is a whole area there too.
It's actually more important than you might think, because as a defender, especially if all you've ever been defending in like a SOC or whatever, you don't think like a hacker very well unless you've actually practiced it. And so somebody coming in and doing their penetration tests, doing a penetration test for you, they're going to get someone that's experienced as an attacker, and they are going to show you why you were not thinking about the world well. And you'll go back and lick your wounds, and hopefully the enterprise or whatever it is you're responsible for protecting will be much better protected.
Much better. And folks, I would say as well, do not get stressed about pen tests. They are there to help you. They're brilliant because, just like Rob said, it's near on impossible to have thought of everything. And if you get through a pen test with a few mediums, then pat yourself on the back.
Seriously, good day.
It's a good day. So Rob, what is it that you do with Monarx?
I am the CTO. So I've basically been a serial CTO as a startup guy. I really like the problems. So I enjoy being able to try to take them head on, dissect them, create interesting, innovative, ideally, solutions to them, and kind of push the state of the art forward is really always my goal. For good reason, not just because it's fun, though it is fun.
It was a typical CTO response as well, wasn't it? Especially with that kind of
a little bit. I could have said that about anything, changing like one or two words.
No, that's
Well,
awesome. And just as a very high level for those that don't fully understand what it is that Monarchs do, what is it that Monarchs do particularly?
so we take care of malware. We are
Mhm.
an anti-malware solution tailored specifically to hosting providers.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between the malware and viruses and things that you may have a little bit of familiarity with,
Mhm.
and what's actually on web hosters. If you can imagine it, what are you defending against when you install an anti-malware solution or a firewall in front of your enterprise,
Mhm.
or EDR, any of the defensive things? What are you defending against? You're defending against the cloud,
Mm.
the idiots and evil people that are in there attacking you.
Mhm.
We are out there where the Delta forces in the nastiest parts of the internet actually trying to take care of the problem at the root. And it's a different world. It's got its own challenges, interesting, exciting, but yeah, that's us.
Well, I tip my hat to you, sir. Well, thank you for all the hard work
Uh,
you guys do. Well, for this next few questions, mate, we'd really like to pummel you with some kind of WordPress particular focused questions. And we're hoping to hit you with about 8 questions where you might be able to help our audience with their WordPress sites, working with the hosts that they're on. So are you ready to rock and roll, bud?
let's do this.
Okay, so the first one then is, what is the most significant security threat facing WordPress sites today?
They're admins.
Ah, humans.
Yeah, yeah, the humans, the people who run and control the system. Two ways they fail really easily. They don't realize you always have to be updating your stuff. The reason that some things get pushed is for security reasons. You have to install those updates. And the second one, and actually the most common and easy to prevent, passwords. Please do not use admin as your password. Don't use anything that you make up. Use a password manager. If there's nothing else that you take from this, use a password manager. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's that.
because when you make things up, you end up making something up that I guess could be guessed. Because the only way I'll ever remember anything is if I kind of create some sort of pattern that I can follow that's based on my life.
Which
Therefore,
other people have done. But
mhm.
also, and perhaps something people don't realize, if you decide, hey, 8 characters is enough, you're wrong.
Mm.
My GPU can crack that in 3-4 minutes. It doesn't matter. You
Ouch.
could have their completely random 8 character password,
Mm.
and yeah, 3 or 4 minutes and I'll have it out. So when you use a password manager, 16, 20, 24 characters, you don't have to remember it. Push that off into the program.
This was not sponsored by 1Password, but it is a very good platform that I use anyway. I'm sure there's
I
many other
agree.
providers.
I also, I don't know if you're getting money for that, but I also use it. I think it's
Ah, cool,
fantastic.
man. Oh, well, I feel happy, like ex-government guy uses the same software I use. Happy days. All right, let's keep going. Our next question then, how often should WordPress site owners update their themes and plugins to maintain security?
They need to do it constantly. I would strongly recommend actually checking every day
Okay.
to see has there been any security updates and installing them. The problem is that once there's a security vulnerability released,
Mhm.
these attackers shotgun the internet. And you see these sites, 100 million WordPress sites taken over by yada yada yada.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They just hit everybody. They don't care. They just guess and test who's vulnerable to this. So you have to stay ahead of that. If you hear of a security vulnerability, if you checked in the morning and your plugin has an upgrade, go, go, go. It's legitimately an emergency situation.
And it's only a matter of time, I guess, isn't it? So if I'm only updating once a week, that vulnerability is released the day after I've done an upgrade. I'm leaving it for a whole other week. There is definitely potential, like you said, they're doing that kind of spray and pray approach, aren't they? Where they will try and get every
Yeah.
website they possibly can. And if I am vulnerable, I'm probably going to get hacked, which I did actually. I got by that Bricks vulnerability that was out a few months ago. I had about
Yeah,
3 sites that I hadn't updated in time, and they all got absolutely chock full of malware. It was awful to
yeah.
clean up.
It's rough. I do want to say, don't feel bad if you get popped.
Mm.
It is incredibly common. When we get installed on these servers, we find 30% of users have been hacked. So you're not alone. If it happens, don't be embarrassed. Seek help. It's all right.
I feel a bit better now. Thanks, mate.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
What are the common signs that a WordPress site might have been compromised?
So the one that the admin is going to notice almost immediately is a redirect. So when people start going to the page
Mhm.
and they're pushed into casinos or porn or whatever, and
Mhm.
that's the first thing you're going to notice probably. The other things you might notice are page load speeds going down, and you have no idea why is my site. First thing you're going to imagine is the hosting provider is at fault here. They're obviously the ones, they're supposed to be doing this. It might be that you've sideloaded a Bitcoin miner, or you have a phishing page now
Mhm.
running in the background that you're not aware of, that's getting tons of traffic. So if there's weird things that you're not 100% sure why it's going on, go in and look, try to verify there's not malware hanging out. Check the database if there are redirects. A lot of times they shotgun the redirects into the database tables.
Mhm.
It's obnoxious. And if you do find any of that, if you're good, you can clean it yourself. If you don't know cybersecurity very well, hire a professional. They'll be able to
Absolutely.
help you.
Yeah, because my installations were riddled, so I ended up having to restore backups and everything prior to, and then run updates, and then re-import content, etc. It was a nightmare, and it
If
took
you
me a very
catch it
long time.
early enough,
Yeah,
that does work.
true. I only
If
had
you
a
don't,
30-day cycle on backups as well. So if I hadn't have noticed for 31 days, that was me gone.
that would have
So
been it.
yeah,
Yep.
I'd have been very upset. I do also remember, I know these are going to be quick, but we can edit. Um, but I remember that I actually had a PayPal phishing page popped on one of my servers that I didn't know about for several days until the host spotted it and sent me an email saying they've disabled my account because they've realized there's this PayPal. I mean, this is like 2006 or something like that, long time ago, back when I'm pretty sure it was like CG. Do you remember Perl? Well, you obviously remember Perl, Perl CGI scripts and that, and there was a whole load of Perl scripts in my CGI bin, and
Nice.
yeah, I had like this little clone of PayPal rocking and rolling to try and capture people's information, etc. But anyway,
PayPal was good, especially way back when it was one of the only ones you logged into.
yeah,
But now, since you log into any bank, all
uh-huh.
banks, they all get used.
Yeah,
And it's really easy to scrape the bank and like copy it and make it look legitimate.
scary,
And
really
it
is.
really is. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
which goes back to that security flaw of humans. Be careful, folks.
Yeah, for real.
Check everything. So, how important is it to use a security plugin on a WordPress website? And I would also caveat that with, are they any good, as in a plugin?
Indeed. So there's basically two philosophies in terms of security. There's
Mhm.
one where your hosting provider has something installed on the server,
Yeah.
and it's protecting you kind of at the server level, and they'll usually advertise that
Mhm.
that they're doing that. The other one is you've taken the plunge and you are going to manage your own security for your website, and that's where these plugins come in. If you have the hosting provider protecting you in the background, you can have a plugin, you can not have a plugin.
Mhm.
What they've got behind the scenes is probably decent. If you're just going it alone and you just have a plugin, that is going to take care of so much trash.
Mhm.
You're going to have a longer time to patch these vulnerabilities. You're going to have, better chance of not getting brute forced with your authentication. Like, it just takes care of a ton of trash.
Yeah.
But you are going to get popped eventually.
Mhm.
The reality of the matter is the attackers are coming in and they have the same privileges as the plugin.
Yeah.
And so there's a ton of dark web activity to talk about, hey, in this version of this security plugin, all you got to do is overwrite these 3 functions before you blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's an unfortunate reality of having the same privileges.
Why do they do it? The meanies. What are some basic steps to secure a WordPress website from brute force attacks?
The best thing you can possibly do is make sure that your credentials are secure.
Okay.
You got good passwords, maybe you got 2 auths, so on and so forth. That means that the brute force will never work, and so you're secured. The other thing you can do is some of these plugins are actually fairly good at just taking out the brute force ones because they're pretty easy to identify.
Yeah.
And so either way, I would say is a good call.
Well, actually, on that, then my next question is: how can a website owner ensure their login credentials are secure?
Not paid, 1Password.
One password.
Or any password manager. That is really what you need to do.
You mentioned though 2FA as well. What's the benefit of throwing that into the game?
So 2FA is it's useful. It's really nice. It means that if somebody does guess your password and try and log in, they need access to another piece of information in order to succeed.
Yeah.
It's kind of a layered approach.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that people don't necessarily realize is if you have an incredibly secure password that nobody has access to, you're effectively protected and you don't need the extra layer.
Right.
But the vast majority of people don't. And so an admin can force 2FA to make sure that even though your password is admin, people still can't get to your account. And so really
to generate something. Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of an additional safety measure.
What is the role of regular backups when it comes to WordPress security?
So for security purposes, it's exactly where you ran into. If you notice it early enough, if you get popped and you notice it early enough, you can destroy what's live, bring in the backup, and hopefully the delta isn't too bad. You can recreate it. From security perspective, that is what they allow you to do. They are the only 100% effective way to secure yourself against ransomware.
Mm-hmm.
Ransomware is not a huge thing in web hosting yet, but it's growing and it's actually pretty scary.
Yeah.
And so,
especially
backups.
E-commerce, I imagine as well, because that's live data that's changing regularly.
Exactly. And you don't, especially if you have a busy site, you don't want to try to put together 2 days of history.
No.
Just don't. But better than nothing. Oh my goodness, do back your stuff up.
Yes, absolutely. And then as we come into land on this round robin, mate, what sort of activity could I look at maybe on my server logs, maybe on Google Analytics or anything else like that, that might be classed as unusual or suspicious activity, like you mentioned earlier, that, that might trigger that thought process of something might be going on here?
Well, other than the obvious redirect, and those are pretty clear. But if you get onto the system and you find files or directories that you don't recognize, you didn't put them in, that's malware. 100%. That is not you. It's an attacker.
Okay.
If you recognize, or if you look at the processes and why, I've never seen 4 of these processors are using 100% CPU. What's going on there? That's probably an attacker. Just kill them and see what happens.
Yeah.
The server is very resilient. You pretty much can't take it down. So when in doubt, just kill the thing.
Yep.
It'll come back up. And the other thing you might notice is if you end up on a blacklist and you don't know why, like, I didn't do anything, everything was great.
Yeah.
You probably have a phishing site side loaded
somewhere in there, which you can get rid of. Yeah. Well, mate, thank you so much. For anyone, if you have any of those problems, let us know in the comments. How did you deal with them? What were your horror stories? How did you fix them? We're really interested because I just want to know that I'm not alone. I've been hacked multiple times, much to my detriment, but not recently, which is nice because we've had help from legends such as Monarx. And let's talk about Monarx specifically, buddy, because I'd love to learn more. I'm sure the people listening and watching in would. Could you explain the tech that you're allowed to behind Monarx and how you are able to detect and prevent malware differently from, I guess, more traditional security solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, a real quick primer on what does a traditional security solution do?
That would help.
So for anti-malware specifically, a traditional solution is to open up a file and read through it and see if there are strings, groups of characters that match a known bad. So give you an example, there's this King Defacer guy, and he uses his name in all of his source code. And so every anti-malware product in the entire world has his name as a trigger to say, oh, this is a bad, and they'll kick it back. And that's actually more common than you might expect. And so it's decently effective to use these strings to identify. The problem is that it's also fairly easy to make it so that there aren't strings that are recognizable.
Yeah.
And so if your sole idea, if you're, traditional and your sole thing is let's find the strings that are bad, let's find the strings that are bad.
Yeah.
If you have a file that doesn't have bad strings in it, if it obfuscated is the industry term for it. If it's obfuscated well, there's nothing you can do with those signatures to reliably identify it without taking out just a ton of good stuff alongside it. And so kind of backed into this, we're like, we need a different solution. We need to figure out how to get through this. And we came to the conclusion that the only possible way was to deobfuscate it. Now, that isn't as difficult as it sounds. PHP, we'll just use that as an example. It's a very common type of malware. The PHP engine has to deobfuscate it in order to execute the code.
Okay.
So it always knows it, in order to actually function. So what we realized is we could just ask the PHP engine, hey, what would you execute right at the very end stage there? Could you
Yeah.
give us that? Could you pass it out? It's great. It works wonderfully. The challenge is it also takes a fair amount of resources.
I can imagine.
So you can't run that on the customer's servers. You're just wasting their money. In a traditional thing, you run anything you want on the endpoint. They're just going to be annoyed. Oh, why is this happening?
Yeah.
If you run that on the web hoster's servers, you're actually burning their product. You're worse than malware at that point. You're just wasting their resources. And so we had to pull the files in. That was basically the conclusion, is we have to absorb that cost. But once we did, we realized, hey, we can deobfuscate it. We can run analytics against the original, against the deobfuscation, against the difference. We can pull out all of this metadata from these files. We have about 9 million different features that we pull out, create metadata for, to use for our analysis. And that's really, the secret sauce or whatever, is the different facets that we can use to look at any given file and to really understand what could this be used for.
So sorry, Karen.
I was just going to say, and then our signatures aren't string related.
Yeah.
They are functionally. What does this function do? What does this file do? That kind of thing.
So my oversimplistic response, or my understanding of this, to make sure I've really nailed it, is that traditionally we're just looking for snippets of text that are the same as bad stuff that have been seen in the past, and we've got a massive database of, oh, that looks like it's probably bad. Let's pop that in the quarantine bin and notify the user. What you folks are doing is actually saying, right, let's simulate this and work out what this is going to do. So we're I can never say that word. We're decrypting. That'll do. We're decrypting this, and we're saying, hey, what's the output? What are you going to do with this? What's the intended functionality? What's the intended consequences, etc.? So you guys are running those simulations offsite and able to then understand, oh, yep, that's fine, that's legitimate. But this, we need to flag this as this is an issue. So you guys are taking it that step further. You're not looking for some strings, i.e. Control F. Does this line of code exist?
Did I see this?
If so, you're actually saying, hey, what do you do? Let's see the output and let's actually monitor that.
Understand? Yeah,
that's so cool. And how does that sort of I presume that never existed. What sort of work did you guys have to do to build such a system?
I mean, non-trivial. There's really two components of it. Yeah. Just ingesting that much data in the first place. Just being able to handle the quantity of information that we get is non-trivial. We actually abuse AWS a little bit.
Okay.
Their pricing is set up for a different model, and so we kind of use their systems in a way that they didn't expect.
Sure.
Don't tell them. Nobody tell them. But in any event, we had to build the infrastructure to be able to handle all of that.
Can imagine.
On it. And then the other one was nobody had ever really done this kind of identification before. So we pretty much had to make it up. We had to build it out. We had to test it. We had to throw this away. It didn't work. Oh, expound on that, so on and so forth. And of course, machine learning. We did all the AIs and the everythings, and it's there. And
welcome to our AI overlords.
Yeah, indeed. It's actually not as useful as you might imagine. Yeah. So when you do classification with machine learning, which is ultimately what you'd want to do here, you if you get 99% accuracy in your classification, you have the greatest ML in the world. Congratulations. That is phenomenal. That is not even remotely close to good enough when you're talking about billions of files.
Yeah, I bet.
And we deal at billions of files a day. And so if you don't have 6 or 8 nines on your confidence, you're just going to take out swaths of the internet.
Wow.
And so machine learning is useful, but not in the hey, the machine's going to classify everything for you. No, it's
not. That's a shame.
It is. It's really a bummer.
I could put my feet up. Have you got any kind of incredible success stories where you guys have been able to help someone who did not know what was going on or hadn't realized there was a hack, or I don't know, any story like that?
Actually, one's top of mind. It happened fairly recently.
Okay.
So it's very common for an attacker to take over a site to do bad things, but it isn't uncommon for the attacker to simply just pay for access, a nice, cheap shared hosting plan. They'll pay for it and do their stuff legitimately as a customer. And we ran across one of these,
Oh.
and they had possibly the most advanced phishing campaign I've yet come across. They had used AI to
Mm.
generate sound, customized voice recordings, basically. They would call someone. So they've got their name, they've got whatever other information they have in there. And the way the call was is they call you and they say, "Hey, Lee, we've detected that there is some suspicious activity. Did you check into a hotel in the middle of Oklahoma last night?" And you're like, no, I absolutely did not. And they're like, "Oh, good. I'm so glad we flagged this for you. So we would absolutely love to take care of this. Got this. Is every fine? We do need to verify that it's you, though."
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, banking question 1, banking question 2, banking question 3, banking question 4. All right, that's great. We're going to go ahead and take care of this. Don't even worry about it. It will not show up on your bills. Thank you so much. And you think, "Oh, dodged a bullet there." And they think, "Sweet." And they call up your bank
Yeah.
and they answer question number 1, question number
Oh
2, question
man.
number 3.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, could you do a transfer for me real quick? I know it's
Yeah.
kind of awkward and old, but here's the information. Could you send?" So if someone calls you, do not give them any information. If
Mm-hmm.
they call you, assume that they're an attacker. That is the best possible state you should be. If you call someone, a known number or
Yeah.
whatever, that's your banker. But if they call you, they are not the bank. They are not good.
And how does this relate to the specific story that you had? Is this what happened with the client site?
Yeah. So what happened is the hosting provider had no idea that this was occurring on their servers.
Yeah.
We uncovered it and we contacted them and said, "Hey, this isn't just a violation of terms of service. This is actually illegal. What do you want to do in this situation?" Is you get into a weird like, well, really, we'd like to find them and prosecute them and shut this whole ring down, but we
Yep.
also don't want our services used for illegal things. So we had to sit down and figure out, what do you want to do? Do we want to
Yeah.
allow it to run? Do we want to shut the whole thing down? Do we want to silently quarantine? Like, how do we want to actually take care of that? And so we work with the hosting provider to
Yeah.
figure out exactly how to take care of it. We got everything done, and that's ongoing in the background, basically, what the fallout is. Hopefully it's very severe for them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges with this is that it's almost always international. And
Sure.
as you can imagine, it's very difficult to prosecute in some random foreign country that you don't know and don't have lawyers in.
Hard to detect though as well. I assume you were able to detect that because of the layer of access that you've got to the files, etc.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. Is we simply had the visibility.
Mm.
We pulled it up. There was suspicious things happening
Mm-hmm.
that our engine couldn't automatically classify. It said, "Hey, this is a little wonky. Human, could you
Yeah.
verify?"
Hey,
When
human.
we looked at it, yeah, when we looked at it, we're like, "Hey, wait, this isn't malware specifically,
No,
but this is very illegal."
this is
So,
unusual activity.
yeah, indeed.
Well, mate, as we're coming to the end, what emerging security threats should web hosts and us as site owners as well be aware of? And how are you guys helping protect us on into the future?
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit earlier in passing, but ransomware.
Mm.
You hear about these big attacks, hospitals shut down, they had to pay $1 million to get back online, yada, yada, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And traditionally, the ransomware attacks haven't been in the web hosting space very much. It's too small targets to go after. You want $100 million, not, $10,000 a pop. That's changing. We've seen more and more frequently ransomware. Now, it's not huge yet, but it's growing. And that's very scary because it's a very difficult type of malware to deal with. We have some innovations in the background that we're cooking up to assist end users with this. I want to talk about them
Patent
because
pending.
I don't want to tip our hand.
Patent pending.
But exactly. It's pretty scary. It's
Yeah, I
definitely
imagine.
something to be aware of. And
Yeah.
and backups really are the only thing the end user can do. Backups and vigilance.
Yeah.
But that is a very scary trend coming to web hosting soon.
Well, I imagine as well the cost of entry for that is plummeting, isn't it? Because especially with AI, etc., people who perhaps in the past couldn't have worked out how to hack into something or take advantage of a vulnerability, etc., now can. So to them, 10K is actually of interest. Holding someone to ransomware for 10K versus 10 million, if you're a smaller outfit or a one person, so if the cost of entry for them is coming down, more and more people might start to do it.
That is exactly right. It's ultimately a business decision on their part. One of the things that, oh my gosh, generative AI is going to help everything. It's going to be the greatest thing in the world. It makes everything easier.
Unfortunately,
everything
everything
easier.
Even the not so nice folks. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, mate, this has been phenomenal. Very, very eye-opening. I'd say my biggest takeaway from this, or several biggest takeaways, in fact. Number one, humans. That's probably the biggest point of weakness. Number two, use a good password manager. We're not sponsored by 1Password, but, certainly recommended. Also, throw in an extra layer if you can. So two-factor authentication, something along those lines. Also, when somebody ever calls you from anywhere, be it even from Confessio, assume it's an attacker, because it might not be, and actually make sure you go through the right channels to communicate with any of your service providers and your banks, etc., etc. I think they're all of my biggest takeaways from this. Of course, many more, like install good security plugins, work with great companies like Confessio and Monarx, etc. But when it comes to it, I think those would be key, at least for me. But
Could I add one real quick?
Oh yeah, throw it in.
This isn't about WordPress hosting specifically, just a general security hygiene. What do you think is your most valuable login?
Most valuable login? I guess the one I use.
well, yeah. To what service? To what service? Which service is the?
Oh, well, usually always the bank for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's a very natural thing to think. Yep.
No.
That's your email.
Oh yeah, you're right.
With your email,
the
I can
minute
reset
I said
your
it,
bank.
I'm thinking, they can reset everything.
All in one shot. So if your email password isn't the most incredibly secure lockdown thing, if it's not a minimum of 16 characters, and you hear this right now, go in, change your email password. It is core to your identity.
You are so right. That is nuts. That is definitely the weakest point. Not for me. I have a very strong password. 1Password again.
Good stuff.
Not sponsored.
Indeed.
So, mate, how can listeners learn more about Monarx? And I understand you guys have some sort of free trial as well, something along those lines. Maybe I made that up, but let us know.
No, we absolutely do have a free trial.
Sweet.
The best way to learn about us would be, the easiest would be to read our site. But actually, to come and meet us. We're at a lot of the conventions that happen in this space. You can come and talk to us personally. If you contact us on the site, like, hey, contact us. We actually do read those and respond to them. We love chatting with people.
What? I thought people didn't reply to these things.
Right? We're a tech company. No. We love chatting with people, especially people who are smart and curious. And yeah, there's give it a try. If you happen to have server level access, so you're a VPS or a hosting provider, it's completely free. It's super, super easy to install, and we'll actually contact you and reach out and teach you all the cool bells and whistles that we've got. So give it a shot.
Rob, mate, thank you so much for your time. You're an absolute legend. Have an amazing day.
Likewise.
Cheerio.